The day after the midterms is usually the time for both parties to assess their wins and losses. Plan ahead for the next Congress, but today we got that and just a little bit more. So Democratic strategist Joel Payne up late with me on the Final Five to discuss this and more. Joel, where are you joining me from tonight?
Jim, good to be with you. I'm from Gotham. I'm from New York City. I've been here for most of the week doing some coverage around the midterm.
So you're missing a little activity around here. Let's talk about Jeff Sessions. That news came down today. I don't think anybody was surprised. I think we all knew that this was going to happen at some point. But there are a lot of people who say this could trigger some sort of constitutional crisis already. What's your read on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. One, there's questions about legalities here, whether or not the president can actually replace Attorney General Sessions with Mr. Whitaker, who normally what you would do is you would replace the Attorney General with the Deputy Attorney General, of course, Rod Rosenstein. Well, there's an obvious reason why the president is disinterested from doing that. Also, there's the matter of whether or not the president wants to provoke a fight here. It seems to me that the president feels emboldened by some of the more positive outcomes of last night's midterms for him and his party. And I think he's trying to lure Democrats into a fight here. He wants to be in a, as he said today in his press conference, a warlike posture. It'll be interesting to see if Democrats respond in kind.
Well, let's talk about the midterms, because obviously if you're looking at it from your perspective as a Democrat, it's good in the House because suddenly the Democrats have the House again. But at the same time, you didn't take the Senate. You lost ground in the Senate. So how do you look at this long term?
Jim, I'm sure you like boxing like I do. I'm calling this a split. And as you know, with the split decision, the tie goes to the champion. And so, look, I think Democrats have a lot to hang their hat on. They performed really well in some governor's races in places where traditionally Democrats don't perform well. There's a Democratic governor of Kansas today. There's now a Democratic governor in Nevada. Performed strongly in the Senate race in Nevada. Stacey Abrams, after looking like she was going to have to concede last night, is actually sticking around in Georgia. But there were some gut punch losses that Democrats are going to have a hard time getting over. I think a lot of Democrats were counting on winning Florida. I think a lot of Democrats thought that they had a good chance to win that governor's seat in Ohio. Same with Iowa. So while there were a lot of gains in the House that have been much ballyhooed and deservedly so, because now Democrats have a seat at the table, unfortunately, Democrats are still not able to beat President Trump in some key areas: Florida, Ohio, and Iowa. There's some real problems in those states for Democrats the last few cycles. They're eventually going to have to clean that up if they're going to defeat the president in 2020.
Let's look at what we're going to see in about 2 months here, where we see an election for Speaker, and we just looked at Nancy Pelosi there. I think she would be the de facto choice for Speaker, but considering the fact that President Trump has had a lot of success using her name at rallies, we know that the Democrats love to bring, or Republicans love to bring up Nancy Pelosi's name because of what she evokes as a San Francisco liberal. Is she the best choice for Speaker?
Jim, this was fascinating to me today. Obviously, the president had that raucous press conference that I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk to in a second. Then Nancy Pelosi responded with her press conference. And you know what I found interesting? Despite the fact that obviously she's got a lot of good things to say, the entire message that Democrats were pushing was, we've got these young, dynamic leaders, these female leaders all across the country. Where were they? There was Nancy Pelosi standing in front of a bunch of flags. And while certainly that made sense for her, did that make sense for the party? I think there's going to be a big fight over the House Democratic leadership. Leader Pelosi announced that she's going to be running for Speaker. I imagine she might have one or two challengers. I think odds are that she will probably end up being the Speaker, but I think there are very high likelihood that there will be changes to the leadership team of Representative Hoyer, who obviously Marylanders know very well. Yep. And also Jim Clyburn. I don't think that same leadership team will be intact by the end of this process.
Before we go, I just wanted to ask you, in your capacity as a Democratic strategist, when you look at the calls for bipartisanship we saw today from President Trump at that press conference, which he said he wants to work with Democrats. When you look at Democrats, we know that Democrats had a message, but some of those candidates had messages that basically said, we're going to resist and we're going to obstruct President Trump's agenda. So if they find themselves working with the president, does that hurt Democrats down the road when they made this promise to do this, to approach the president like this?
Jim, unfortunately, everyone is disincentivized from working together. And that's not just a Washington thing. That's something that comes from the voters. Voters have told you they do not reward people for working together. It's one of those things that people like to say, oh, I want Congress to work together and come together for bipartisanship and comedy and all of those things. But then people who are moderates, people who are in the middle, who are making deals, are often the ones that are sacrificed first. So I think the lesson that both sides learned, for the president, he learned double down, trust my gut, go with what I know, go with what got me here. For Democrats, we have to fight, fight, fight. And by the way, as you know, yesterday, along with being the midterms, was the beginning of the 2020 presidential season. And I think more important than the voices of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer today, the voices of those 2020 hopefuls, people like Elizabeth Warren, people like Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, others. Those are the voices that are going to be leading the Democratic Party for the next year and a half, 2 years. That'll be interesting to hear what they have to say.
Real quick, who's the first one to declare for 2020?
Well, I think Elizabeth Warren was flexing a lot of her muscles around her organization, around the midterms, helping out a lot of Democrats, raising money, et cetera. I think others have been in Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yeah.
I'm going to be seeing a lot of Democrats spending time in Des Moines and Manchester and Vegas coming up here very soon.
Lovely places to be this time of the year, too. Joel Payne, good to see you, my friend. Back after this in the Final Five.